Tanya Kach had been getting into trouble at school. She was 13 years old and her divorced parents were creating a toxic environment at both of their homes. She felt like there was nobody out there who truly cared about her. That was until she met the 38-year-old security guard at her new school. He began talking to her, listening to her problems, and making her believe that he was in love with her. Unfortunately, that man was a predator and he manipulated Tanya into running away to his house where she spent 10 years on the side of a milk carton. This is Monsters. Thomas Hose was born on November 11, 1957 in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. He was born in a house on Soul Street, the same house he would live in almost his entire life as a free man. He instilled fear into his parents at a young age by threatening or even carrying out violence against them if they tried to discipline him in any way. When he was 13, he kicked his father in the groin when he attempted to punish his behavior. Once when his mother confiscated some marijuana she found in his bedroom, he told her she had an hour to put it back or else he would burn their house down. Needless to say, she put it back and the parents continued to live in fear of their own son. He was not a good student, never having graduated from high school. He briefly attended a cosmetology school, but that was not because he wanted to work in that field. He thought it would be a good place to meet women. He was unable to carry out his dream of becoming a police officer as they required a high school diploma and would have checked that he had one. Instead, he lied on an application to become a security guard for a company who didn't care to check his references or confirm that he had graduated high school. They would have also learned that he had no other work experience. He had spent his young adult life dealing drugs. Now, that might not have been so bad if he was assigned to a position with less responsibility, but in 1994 he was sent to be the security guard for Cornell Intermediate School in McKeesport. The following year, Tanya began attending the 8th grade at Cornell. Tanya Kach was born on October 14, 1981 in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, a riverside town just south of Pittsburgh. She was the only child of Jerry and Sherry Kach, who had been high school sweethearts. Jerry was a union butcher and Sherry worked at the local McDonald's. The family enjoyed their time together with local events and they had gone to Disney World 3 times by the time Tanya was 13. Growing up, the family attended the local Methodist church where Tanya loved both Bible school and Bible camp. She prided herself on selling the most cookies in her Girl Scout troop and she loved music, learning to play instruments and singing in the choir. Tanya described her childhood as happy, but she felt like something was a little off at home. She noticed that her parents were quiet and even on family vacations they never seemed to laugh. That seemed to be caused by years of unhappiness between the couple. When Tanya was 7, Jerry got pneumonia and it caused him to be out of work for a while. That created financial strain, which is never a good thing for a struggling relationship. The situation was compounded when Sherry started suffering from mental health issues. She would repeat words or burst into laughter for no reason. She began claiming that someone at the laundromat was stealing her clothes. She started staying out late, drinking, and having sex with other men. When Tanya started trying to interfere with her mother's affairs, Sherry became abusive. As Tanya was about to reach her teens, her parents were divorcing and fighting over custody. Tanya told the court stories of abuse, saying she didn't feel safe with her mother. Sherry ended up being involuntarily committed to a mental facility and Jerry was awarded full custody of Tanya. When Sherry was released, she tried to break into the house multiple times. Once she even threw a brick through a window. As soon as the divorce was finalized, Jerry and Tanya moved to McKeesport where Jerry's new girlfriend lived. He had met Joanne McGuire through a dating service, a divorced mother of a 7-year-old son named Kevin. Jerry and Tanya moved in with Joanne and Kevin and became a much smaller Brady Bunch. Though Joanne initially seemed keen to have Tanya around, her behavior quickly turned negative. Joanne would make plans for herself, Jerry, and Kevin, but leave Tanya at home. When they went out, she would unplug the phone and take it with them so Tanya couldn't chat with her friends. Tanya described her father as being completely subservient to Joanne and just went along with whatever she wanted, offering no support to his daughter. Tanya began attending Cornell Intermediate School in 1995. At the new unfamiliar school, she became friends with the girl who was assigned to show her around. Unfortunately, that girl was a bit of a troublemaker who regularly cut class, and she ended up introducing Tanya to some other teens who tended to walk on the edge of following the rules. Tanya began skipping school and running away from her father's home to her mother's house. Despite her mother having abused her in the past, she still used her as an escape from her father's house. The abuse from Joanne wasn't the only problem about living there. She started babysitting for neighbors, and the father, Kevin Churchill, began offering Tanya marijuana and then started propositioning her for oral sex. She wrote in her diary that she never gave in to it, but he did make her touch his genitals once. Joanne gave Tanya no privacy, having removed the door to her bedroom, so you won't be surprised to find out that she read Tanya's diary. When she got to the entries about Kevin, she told Jerry, who showed up at the Churchill house with a baseball bat. Ultimately, the police were called and nobody was held accountable for their actions, not the threats with a weapon or the sexual assault of a child. After being propositioned by an uncle not long afterward, it's not hard to understand why Tanya was looking for other adults to find stability. When Tanya started attending Cornell Intermediate, she was warned by other students that the security guard Thomas was mean. It was only a few weeks after she started attending that she had her first encounter with the supposedly mean man, but the interaction didn't go that way. She was walking down the hall when he asked for her hall pass. When she showed it to him, he made a joke and smiled. Following that interaction, Tanya would smile and say hello to him whenever she saw him in the halls, not seeing any sign of him being mean. Eventually, Thomas would ask her how she was doing, and it was exactly the type of attention she was searching for. Thomas likely knew that. Predators have a type of radar that can sense people's vulnerabilities. Pedophiles can sense when a child is in a position to be taken advantage of, just like cult leaders can sense that in adults, and they move in to prey on the opportunity. It was likely that Thomas had already picked her out before their first encounter. He knew she was the new kid, and he probably spent the first few weeks she was there watching from afar, picking up on her insecurities. Then he slowly worked his way into her life, gaining her trust by being the compassionate ear she could vent to. His plan worked when Tanya started believing that Thomas cared about her more than her own parents. He told her how he was also an only child and had also had problems with his parents growing up. It's unclear how accurate those stories were, though. They may have just been a way to make Tanya feel more like she could relate with him. It wasn't long before Tanya developed a crush on Thomas and started writing him letters, pouring out her heart to him. Thomas told her he liked the letters and asked her to keep writing them, the exact opposite of what any grown adult should have done. But clearly he was able to continue grooming Tanya since the two were being so discreet about their blossoming relationship, right? Nope. They did absolutely nothing to hide the fact that a 13-year-old was in love with a 38-year-old security guard and that he was doing nothing to stop it. The principal saw them walking together in the halls during class times and didn't intervene. The assistant principal had heard the rumors about the couple and didn't see the need to speak up to anybody about it. One teacher learned about the love letters that Tanya was writing and did as much as moving the girl to a study hall class in an area of the school that Thomas didn't frequent, but didn't actually act in any way that would put a stop to the inappropriate behavior. Tanya's frequent unexcused absences caused the school staff to label her an at-risk student, but they did not enroll her in the student assistance program mandated by Pennsylvania law. They allowed her to drift through the school unprotected from the conflict she was experiencing at home and the predator who was using that emotional turmoil to groom her. By Christmas of 1995, Tanya was 14 and Thomas gave her a necklace as a gift. Then in January, hidden under the bleachers at the gym, they kissed for the first time. The first time Tanya stayed with Thomas was at the end of January of 1996. Thomas had lived with his parents his whole life outside of a brief period where he was married. That relationship produced a son named Justin, but ended pretty shortly after it began. Thomas moved back in with his parents, Bud and Eleanor, and eventually his son came to live with them. Bud and Eleanor were away for the weekend, and Thomas allowed Tanya to stay at the house, telling Justin to keep his mouth shut. 12-year-old Justin obeyed, as he feared his father just like Bud and Eleanor feared their son. When Thomas's parents returned, Tanya stayed locked in his bedroom while he was away at work. She couldn't even leave to use the toilet and was eventually given a bucket to use. After a few days, Thomas took Tanya to a friend's house to stay. Judy Sokol was a friend of Thomas's who lived nearby with her children. He told Judy how terrible Tanya's home life was and convinced her that she needed to escape. Judy let Tanya stay with her while Thomas was at work during the day. This was one of the few situations where an adult finally came to their senses and realized the situation was not appropriate. The following week, Judy sent Tanya back to her family. That lasted 4 days before Thomas talked to Judy into letting Tanya return. Judy had told Tanya to go live with her mother if she needed to get away from Joanne, but Tanya explained that her mother was unwilling to take her in. She was desperate and had no other options. On February 10, 1996, Tanya left her father's home and arrived at Judy's. It was the last time anyone else would see her for 10 years. For the next month, Tanya lived with Judy, who treated her well. Tanya was able to start believing that running away to be with Thomas might have been a good idea, but that feeling wouldn't last. It was in a bedroom at Judy's home that Thomas took the 14-year-old's virginity, and it was not a pleasant experience for the girl. She was still devoted to her religion, and she believed she would be sinning if she had sex at the time, but Thomas got drunk and pushed her hard enough that she gave in. By then, it seemed that Judy knew what was really going on as she helped Thomas alter Tanya's appearance. Then, in March, Tanya went over to Thomas's house, which was within walking distance, and didn't leave. Tanya's father, Jerry, had reported her to the local child services department as a runaway, and they began asking around about her whereabouts. One of the people they contacted was Judy, and that was enough to make her stop cooperating with Thomas. But clearly it wasn't enough to report his behavior with the teenager to the authorities. She just told him that he was no longer welcome at her house and said Tanya couldn't come back. Once at Thomas's house full-time, she had to live in complete seclusion so that Bud and Eleanor didn't know she was there. She stayed inside his bedroom all day, watching television with headphones on, using a bucket as a toilet, and eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and bananas. Occasionally, long after his parents went to sleep, Thomas would sneak Tanya down to the basement so she could take a shower. Tanya accepted the conditions because she thought she was sacrificing for love. She believed that Thomas loved her and that she needed to do anything to be with him, but those feelings gradually faded. When she got sick, he would not get her medical treatment. She got psoriasis so bad that it left her with permanent scars. She had fillings fall out, and he refused to take her to the dentist. When she realized she had lice, Thomas told her he would kill her and dump her body in the river if she gave it to either him or Justin. Except Tanya didn't come into contact with anyone else, so it was more likely that one of them had given it to her. Tanya remained hidden in Thomas's bedroom until October of 1996, but she realized that her situation was not healthy. She questioned Thomas's love and surely didn't want to keep living the way she had for him. One day, when Thomas returned home from work, Tanya told him she was planning to leave. She didn't know where she would go, but living in near solitude was driving her crazy and she needed to go. Thomas was not about to let that happen. He told Tanya that he would kill her if she ever tried to leave him. Then he told her about 2 local girls who had recently been killed, suggesting that he may have been the killer. There's never been any evidence that Thomas had killed anyone, but Tanya didn't know that. Tanya may have arrived at Thomas's house willingly, but by not allowing her to leave, she became a captive. Tanya spent years living 99% of her time in Thomas's small bedroom, but he wasn't the only person she interacted with. Justin also lived with them, and he also slept in the same bedroom. He had a spot on the floor next to the bed. It was likely one of the things that made Tanya able to get through her time locked in the house. She had someone else close to her age that she could bond with, and she did bond with Justin. They became like siblings, playing video games and talking about random topics. Of course, that was while Justin was there, which he wasn't always. Thomas had work and Justin had school, so on weekdays, Tanya would get up when they did and help them get ready. Then she would lock the bedroom door behind them after they left. She would spend a moment saying prayers, and then she would spend the day watching television with her headphones on. Then she would read magazines and listen to the radio, again with headphones on. She was a silent entity, existing in the same house as Bud and Eleanor without them ever knowing. When she heard Justin or Thomas come home, she would unlock the door. Only then would she watch television or listen to the radio without headphones. The solitude caused Tanya to develop mental health problems, which shouldn't be surprising. She started filling the quiet in her head by counting, which turned into obsessive-compulsive rituals. If she made a slight noise, she would need to repeat it a certain number of times. It was what her brain developed as a tool to offer her some comfort. Christmases were especially lonely for Tanya. She would be locked in the bedroom closet so Thomas could keep his bedroom door open. The family had a Christmas Eve tradition of exchanging gifts after a holiday dinner, and Thomas would keep his door open to make it easier to bring out the gifts he had gotten for his family. Tanya sat in the closet listening to the family enjoy their gift exchange through the heating vent. Then the next year would go on just like the previous year. Thomas had conditioned Tanya to believe that he was the only person who cared about her. He would constantly point out that nobody was looking for her and that it was because her family didn't care about her. He told her, quote, "You'll never make it on your own. You were put on this earth to take care of me and me to take care of you." Of course, taking care of her meant training her to behave the way he wanted. Not questioning him, not talking back, and letting him do whatever he wanted to her physically. He once said, quote, "I trained you and you are my property." When Jerry and Joanne moved to a new house 15 minutes away in Elizabeth, Thomas told Tanya that it was because they didn't care if she was going to come home. When her mother Sherry remarried years later, Thomas told Tanya that she had moved on as well. As the years went by, every connection Tanya thought she had with the outside world was supposedly lost. Judy had even come by at one point, and after she left, Thomas told Tanya that she had asked if the girl was still with him, but he told her she had taken off long ago. Nobody knew where she was, and they surely weren't going to come rescue her. Tanya turned 18 in 1999, and a few months later, Thomas started giving her a little more freedom. In March of 2000, Tanya told Thomas that she needed new clothes, so he gave her $120 and instructed her on how to get to a shopping center on the outskirts of town. He gave her a strict curfew and had her sneak out of the back door. Now, obviously, Tanya could have easily escaped her situation, but it's not that simple. She had been conditioned to not only fear Thomas, but to believe she had nowhere else to go. She didn't think she could go to the police because she believed nobody was looking for her. She had initially gone to Thomas's house willingly, and her captor likely convinced her that the police would just blame her for the situation she was in. And to be honest, he might have been right. Her father and Joanne would do just that after she was finally free. She believed that her parents had each moved on and didn't want her. And even if she just escaped and lived on the streets, she believed Thomas would come find her and kill her. So her brain went into self-protection mode and followed the instructions given to her by Thomas. Tanya actually described the experience of being out in the open after 4 years of solitude so confusing that she was actually relieved to be back at the hose house. She had purchased some new clothes and was back in the room for the next few months. Despite the experience of being out in the world being scary at first, Tanya began to long for it again. She was sent out shopping again in September, and again she faithfully returned to the house. She also began being allowed to go out on the back porch at night when Bud and Eleanor were asleep. September 23rd was Justin's 17th birthday, and Thomas let Tanya go down the road to a convenience store to get the boy a gift. JJ's Deli Mart was owned and operated by Joe Spirico along with his wife Jan and his daughter Joelle. That family would become important parts of her eventual freedom. As Tanya got older, her desire for full freedom clashed with the fact that Bud's health was declining, causing him and Eleanor to leave the house less, causing Tanya to be locked in the bedroom more often. In an effort to placate Tanya, on Christmas in 2004 he asked her to marry him and she accepted. Then he told her stories of shopping for a wedding ring but never seemed to find the right one. Tanya would later say that she would have married him at the time. Despite her conflicting feelings, she still believed they were in love, which makes sense since she had never been given the opportunity to experience real love. In 2005, though, the situation in the house got even worse when Justin got a job working the night shift at Walmart, which meant he was at home all day trying to sleep. Even using headphones was too much noise sometimes, and she had to be even more quiet while he was in there. That led to the last few months of Tanya's captivity seeing her become someone else. In 2005, Thomas gave Tanya an alias so she could be out more without people knowing who she really was. Of course, that didn't make any sense since, according to Thomas, nobody cared about her, but again, he had convinced Tanya that it was necessary, so Tanya became Nikki Diane Allen. In June of 2005, Bud was hospitalized for an extended period of time, and while his parents were out of the house, he began telling them about his new girlfriend. Can you guess what her name was? That's right, Nikki. Then he suddenly had a brilliant idea to have Nikki come live with them so she could help out around the house once Bud was back home. That was the beginning of Thomas losing control over Tanya. Her relationship with Eleanor started off okay but quickly soured. It caused Tanya to leave the house more often just to get away from her, but one of those times she stumbled upon a thrift store attached to a local Methodist church and she went inside. She started stopping in occasionally, and one of the employees asked her if she wanted to volunteer. She said yes, and then she started attending church services on Sunday. She was also becoming a regular at JJ's, and the owner Joe once asked if she wanted a job. She had to evade the offer because she didn't know her social security number and it wouldn't have matched her alias even if she did. She still became friends with Joe and his wife Jen. Then there were also the people at her church, examples of people in healthy relationships that made Tanya gradually realize that what Thomas was doing was wrong. It was becoming more and more obvious that there were a lot of people out in the world who did care about her and that she did not need Thomas to survive. The moment when she finally asked for help did not come easy. Joe at JJ's had become increasingly confused with Tanya's situation. He knew she was not happy with Thomas, but he didn't understand why she wouldn't leave him. On March 21, 2006, Tanya was at JJ's, and when Joe expressed his concern again, she burst into tears. He asked her what was wrong, and she let it all out. She told him her name wasn't Nikki, she was really Tanya Kach, and she had been held captive by Thomas Hose. Joe told Tanya not to do anything out of the ordinary. He was going to take care of it. Tanya left the store and returned home. After she left, Joe called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and confirmed that Tanya had gone missing 10 years earlier. Then he called the police and told them where Tanya was. Meanwhile, Tanya did her best to act normal around Thomas and his mother, but her nerves were getting to her. She slipped into the basement and used a prepaid cell phone to call Joe, and he told her that the police were on their way. Not long after, she saw a police car pull up outside and greeted the officer at the door. He asked her if she was Tanya Kach, and she said yes. Then he asked where Thomas was, and she directed the officer to his room. 2 more officers joined to climb the stairs to the bedrooms. When they brought Thomas down to the living room, he asked Tanya what was going on. Tanya simply responded, quote, "It's over." Eleanor came into the living room from the kitchen and demanded the officers tell her what was going on. An officer explained that Tanya had been held in the house against her will since she was 14 and that Thomas was being placed under arrest. Eleanor was stunned. All she said was, "Okay," before returning to the kitchen. Tanya threw her possessions in a garbage bag and was leaving the house when Thomas yelled out, quote, "Judas!" A grown man who took advantage of a teen girl for his own benefit has the nerve to call her a traitor when she finally manages to escape? What a loser. After being interviewed at the police station, Tanya was reunited with her father, who was married to Joanne by then. She learned that he had reported her missing, but she would say he didn't seem to show much concern about her disappearance. Still, her disappearance was listed by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and she became one of many children who had their picture on the side of a milk carton. The practice, which began in 1984, aimed to make the faces of missing children more visible by putting them in everybody's home. Tanya's image appeared on 400 million milk cartons during the early years of her disappearance. Thomas ended up confessing to much of what happened during the 10 years that Tanya was his captive. Of course, he made it seem like he never threatened her if she suggested leaving, and told the authorities that there were times that Tanya wanted to leave, but they ended up working things out. Yeah, they worked it out by him telling her he would kill her and her not wanting to die. Thomas kinda shot himself in the foot by making Tanya keep a journal about their sexual activity. Investigators found 31 date books where Tanya had recorded each time he raped her and what type of sex it was, oral, vaginal, or anal. Thomas ended up pleading guilty to 3 counts of deviant sexual intercourse, plus aggravated indecent assault, statutory sexual assault, interfering with the custody of a child, corruption of a child, and child endangerment. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was released in 2022 after serving the full term. He only served 5 more years than the time he stole from a child, and now he was walking around a free man. Judy Sokol came forward and admitted that she had not only known that Tanya was with Thomas, but she had dyed the girl's hair to help disguise her near the beginning of her time with him. She was eventually arrested and charged as an accomplice. She pleaded no contest, was found guilty and sentenced to 6 to 23 months in prison with 4 years of probation. Tanya learned that Cornell Intermediate had failed to follow many guidelines that would have kept her safe from someone like Thomas Hose. She attempted to sue the school, as well as the police, for failing to follow up on reports that she was missing, but both lawsuits were dismissed. That wasn't the only way Tanya was failed by the system. After 10 years with poor nutrition and no medical attention, she needed a root canal and a number of cavities filled. The system sent her to the cheapest dentist they could find, who botched her root canal and left her with an infection. Then the Methodist Church in McKeesport told her she was no longer welcome there. They didn't want to deal with the publicity of her captivity. Fortunately, she was able to move to the Methodist Church in Elizabeth. After her relationship with her father and Joanne soured, Tanya moved in with her mother and began attending college. Her mother had been through counseling on how to deal with her daughter's trauma, and it seemed to work well enough for Tanya to get by until she finally moved out to live with her boyfriend. A choice she made entirely on her own. She had finally found an actual relationship and became truly free. Something that took her 10 years longer than it should have because a pedophile monster believed he owned her. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.